We beseech thee so to direct and prosper deliberations of the Parliament now assembled, that all things may be ordered upon the best and surest foundations for the glory of thy name and for the safety, honor, and welfare of the people of these islands. Bless our sovereign King Charles III, William, Prince of Wales, and all the royal family. Give grace to all who exercise authority in our Commonwealth, that peace and happiness, truth and justice, religion and piety may be established amongst us. Especially we pray for the Governor of our Cayman Islands, the Premier, the Speaker of Parliament, the Leader of the Opposition, Ministers of the Cabinet, ex officio members, members of the Parliament, the Chief Justice, and members of the judiciary, that we may be enabled faithfully to perform the responsible duties of our high office. All this we ask for thy great name's sake. Let us say the Lord's Prayer together. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. The Lord bless us and keep us. The Lord make his face shine upon us and be gracious unto us. The Lord lift up the light of his countenance upon us and give us peace, now and always. Amen.
Please be seated. Proceedings are now resumed.
Administration of oaths or affirmations. Oath of allegiance and due execution by Ms. Reshma Sharma, the Acting Honorable Attorney General, responsible for the portfolio of legal affairs, to be the temporary ex officio member of Parliament.
Ms. Sharma. Please stand.
I, Reshma Sharma, do swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to His Majesty King Charles III, his heirs and successors, according to law. So help me God. I, Reshma Sharma, do swear that I will well and truly serve His Majesty King Charles III, his heirs and successors, and the people of the Cayman Islands in the office of ex officio member of the Parliament. So help me God.
Thank you, Ms. Reshma Sharma. You may take your seat. We welcome you as the temporary ex officio member to this honorable house. Members, you may be seated.
Reading by the Honorable Speaker of Messages and Announcements.
I just would like to say briefly to all of our viewing audience and those who may have been tuned in from this morning, just apologies for the late start with the audio and the visual. This is due to the fact that we had Finance Committee concluding in the committee room this morning.
Presentation of petitions.
None?
Presentation of papers and of reports. Report of the Standing Finance Committee on the request to Finance Committee for appropriation changes sought under Section 12 of the Public Management and Finance Act 2020 revision for the financial year ending 31st December 2022, Wednesday, 16th March 2022, to be laid on the table by the Honorable Chairman of the Standing Finance Committee, the Honorable Premier, Minister of Finance and Economic Development.
The Honorable Premier.
Madam Speaker, thank you very much. Madam Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of this Honourable House the report of the Standing Finance Committee on the schedule of appropriation changes sought under Section 12 of the Public Management and Finance Act 2020 revision with respect to the government's financial year ended 31st December 2022.
Does the Honourable Premier wish to speak there too?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in accordance with Standing Order 67-4, I have tabled the Standing Finance Committee's report on the schedule of the appropriation changes sought under Section 12 of the Public Management and Finance Act with respect to the government's financial year ended 31st December 2022. Madam Speaker, this report that I have tabled is in respect of a meeting of the Finance Committee held on Wednesday, the 16th of March, 2022. So, Madam Speaker, just for clarity, there are a number of reports. There are, I think, perhaps 3 reports that were not done in 2022, so I will be laying those in addition to the seeking to lay the reports for this current meeting just past the Finance Committee. So, Madam Speaker, at that time in March of 2022, the committee scrutinized and questioned the items appearing on the previously mentioned schedule, as well as changes that were proposed to the schedule. The committee also met today to finalize that outstanding report from March of 2022 and approve myself, or the tabling of the report by myself, as I have just done. Madam Speaker, the committee considered the schedule of appropriation changes put before the committee and also considered further changes that were proposed to the schedule at that time. The committee approved the schedule of appropriation changes sought under Section 12 of the Public Management and Finance Act, and it approved the further changes proposed to the schedule. Just by way of further elucidation, Madam Speaker, the significant changes approved by the committee at that time were 15 million of extra funding to provide a COVID-19 relief stipend to displaced tourism workers in the Cayman Islands due to the delayed return of tourism, robust tourism levels following the border reopening. 5 million to provide COVID-19 relief and support to micro and small businesses due to the delayed return of robust tourism levels following the border reopening. And, Madam Speaker, as the proceedings in Finance Committee were publicly aired and can still be viewed online, I don't think there's a need for me to express in any greater detail the items considered. So, Madam Speaker, just in conclusion, The committee agreed the report that has just been laid, and that is in respect of the meeting on the 16th of March 2022, and that related to consideration of a schedule of appropriation changes sought under Section 12 of the Public Management and Finance Act with respect to the government's financial year ended 31st December 2022. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Report of the Standing Finance Committee on the request of Finance Committee for appropriation changes sought under Section 12 of the Public Management and Finance Act 2020 revision for the financial year ending 31st December 2022, Friday, 10th June 2022, to be laid on the table by the Chairman of the Standing Finance Committee, the Honorable Premier.
Honorable Premier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to lay on the, with your permission, lay on the table of this Honourable House the report of the Standing Finance Committee on the schedule of appropriation changes sought under Section 12 of the Public Management and Finance Act with respect to the government's financial year ended 31st December 2022, as considered at a meeting held on the 10th of June 2022.
Does Honorable Premier wish to speak thereto?
Just briefly, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as noted earlier, in respect of the previous report, this is being laid pursuant to Standing Order 67-4, and it is in relation to the committee meeting, which was actually held on Friday, the 10th of June, 2022, and at which time the changes were considered as noted to the schedule. Madam Speaker, as a result of the meeting today, approval was given to me to finalize and table the report, which has just been done. Just in summary, Madam Speaker, the highlighted areas were $5.35 million to fund the expansion plans of Cayman Islands National Insurance Company, which included the establishment of a local provider network, the expansion of current health insurance products, and the expansion into property and casualty insurance. $1.5 million of extra funding to provide a COVID-19 relief stipend to displaced tourism workers, and $8 million to provide tertiary health care to indigents, seamen, and veterans who are referred for treatment both overseas and locally. Madam Speaker, as noted previously, the full extent of that meeting is still available online, so anyone with an interest can follow along. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Report of the Standing Finance Committee on the request to Finance Committee for appropriation changes sought under Section 12 of the Public Management and Finance Act 2020 revision for the year ending 31st December 2022 and supplementary appropriation changes for the year ended 31st December 2021 and supplementary appropriation changes for the year ended 31st December 2020, Monday, 10th October 2022, to be laid on the table by the Chairman of the Standing Finance Committee, the Honorable Premier.
The Honorable Premier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise again to beg leave to lay on the table of this Honourable House the report of the Standing Finance Committee on the schedule of appropriation changes sought pursuant to Section 12 of the Public Management and Finance Act in respect of the period 31st December 2020, 31st December 2021, and 31st December 2022. In the case of this meeting, which was held on Monday, the 10th of October, 2022.
Does the Honourable Premier wish to speak thereto?
Just very briefly, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as noted previously, the committee would have scrutinized proposed changes as reflected in the schedule of appropriation changes sought under Section 12 at that time. Madam Speaker, there was a meeting today which finalized and authorized the filing of the report. By way of highlight, in respect of the 2020 financial year, there were changes proposed by the committee which reflected $6.3 million to provide medical care to indigent patients, and $3.8 million for comprehensive health care to geriatric residents. With respect to the 2021 financial year, the significant changes approved by the committee were $18.6 million to provide tertiary health care to indigents, seamen, and veterans who were referred for treatment locally and overseas, and $18.3 million to combat the COVID-19 pandemic. Madam Speaker, with respect to the 2022 financial year, the significant changes considered and approved by the committee at that time were $12.1 million to provide general administrative services for the public health programs and $16.1 million to provide tertiary health care services to indigent seamen and veterans who are referred for treatment locally and overseas. Madam Speaker, as noted earlier, the YouTube coverage of that meeting, the recording of that meeting, is available online for members who wish to go back and have a look at it in some detail. I thank you very much.
Report of the Standing Finance Committee on the appropriation changes in accordance with Section 25 of the Public Management and Finance Act 2020 revision for the financial year ending 31st December 2022, supplementary appropriation January 2022 to December 2022, Bill 2023, Wednesday, 7th June 2023, to be laid on the table by the Chairman of the Standing Finance Committee, the Honourable Premier.
The Honourable Premier.
Madam Speaker, thank you. I beg to lay on the table of this Honourable House the report of the Standing Finance Committee on the supplementary appropriation January 22 to December 2022 Bill 2023, which is in respect of the government's financial year that ended on the 31st of December 2022.
Does the Honourable Premier wish to speak thereto?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Briefly, Madam Speaker, the committee had its first meeting on the 7th of June 2023, during which the meeting considered the requested appropriations on the schedule to the bill. The committee also met subsequently, that is today, on the 8th of June, to finalize and approve this report, which has just been tabled. Madam Speaker, the committee considered the schedule to the bill as filed and published, and approved the appropriation changes requested thereon, but made two changes to the schedule to the bill. Madam Speaker, the items on the schedule to the bill can be summarized as follows. They represent actions taken by the government to mitigate the impacts the effects of COVID-19 on vulnerable individuals and business entities, healthcare-related items such as medical care for indigents, public health programs, investigations and treatments, and the offering of an electricity assistance program across the islands. Madam Speaker, by way of highlight, the significant changes included 16.5 million of financial assistance to displaced tourism workers, 8.5 million for budgetary provision in respect of the noted electricity assistance program to give residents across all 3 islands a fuel cost credit to help alleviate the increased price of electricity. It was calculated at that time, Madam Speaker, that it benefited over 22,000 households across all 3 of our Cayman Islands, and it was implemented with the assistance of Caribbean Utilities Company, as well as, I think, for an initial period, Cayman Power and Light, and then for the remainder of the period, in terms of the sister islands, Island Energy Limited. Madam Speaker, there was also 5 million approved, which was made available to micro and small businesses to mitigate the effects of COVID-19 on their operations, 5.8 million to provide medical care to indigent patients, 12.1 million was made available to provide additional funding to public health programs to combat COVID-19, and 30.7 million of additional funding was made available for the purpose of providing tertiary medical care at local and overseas institutions. Again, Madam Speaker, the full details will be available, if not currently available, on YouTube for those who are interested to follow and obtain greater detail in respect of the conduct of the Finance Committee. Madam Speaker, I thank you very much.
Report of the Standing Finance Committee on the request to Finance Committee for appropriation changes sought under Section 12 of the Public Management and Finance Act 2020 revision for the financial year ending 31st December 2023, Wednesday, 7th June 2023, to be laid on the table by the Chairman of the Standing Finance Committee, the Honorable Premier.
Honorable Premier.
Thank you again, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of this Honourable House the report of the Standing Finance Committee on the request to Finance Committee for appropriations, appropriation changes sought under Section 12 of the Public Management and Finance Act 2020 revision for the financial year ending 31st December 2023.
Does the Honorable Premier wish to speak thereto?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. One moment, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as noted, the committee met yesterday, Wednesday, 7th June, at which time it scrutinized and questioned the items appearing on the previously mentioned schedule as tabled, as well as the changes that were proposed to the schedule. Madam Speaker, the committee also met today, June 8th, to finalize and approve the report and the tabling of the report, which has just been done. The committee considered the schedule of appropriation changes put before the committee, and it also considered further changes that were proposed to the schedule. The committee approved the schedule of appropriation changes sought under Section 12, and it approved the further changes proposed to the schedule. Just In terms of highlighting some of those, this is most significant of those, Madam Speaker, there was 4.6 million for the purchase of land in order to facilitate the expansion of public beach and further construction of buildings, infrastructure, and other projects. 2.9 million as an equity investment into Cayman Airways Limited in order to fund the purchase of a third twin otter aircraft. Just going back to the highlighted amount about the 4.6 million, Madam Speaker, I wish to also add by way of detail that this also included the acquisition of land around the end of the bluff in Cayman Brac, around the lighthouse. I think there was approximately about 2 acres there. And then there was another significant amount of acreage, somewhere in the region of about 85 acres in the Peters Cave area of the bluff, all of which, Madam Speaker, reflects very opportune acquisition by the government on behalf of the people of the country. Madam Speaker, in addition, there was a 2.5 million increase approved for the road and infrastructure upgrade for, I think it was miscellaneous roads. Yeah. Madam Speaker, the full context of the Section 12 approvals and discussions, again, is available online for those who wish to follow in more detail. Madam Speaker, thank you very much for the opportunity.
Office of the Commissioner of Police, Cayman Islands Government, 2022 Annual Report, April 2023, to be laid on the table by the Honorable Premier, Minister of Sustainability and Climate Resiliency and Finance and Economic Development.
Honorable Premier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to seek your permission to lay on the table of this Honourable House the 2022 Annual Report of the Office of the Commissioner of Police.
Does the Honorable Premier wish to speak thereto?
Madam Speaker, just briefly, I'm very pleased to lay this annual report for the Office of the Commissioner of Police. The report goes much beyond the fiscal details outlined in the financial statements and provides much detail on the activities and accomplishments of the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service for the 2022 financial year. Madam Speaker, just by way of highlight of some of the key accomplishments and activities of our CAPS, the Cayman Islands Bureau of Financial Services has assessed 152 individual disclosures submitted by the Financial Reporting Authority, or the FRA, making suitable recommendations for appropriate action and completing feedback forms for each. That is an increase, Madam Speaker, of about 34% in terms of disclosures done during, compared to 2021. The Financial Crimes Investigation Unit worked closely with the Crime Task Force and other partner agencies in securing a number of successful convictions in 2022 regarding illicit trafficking, importation of drugs, and possession of firearms and ammunition. Significant sums of money were also, and assets were also recovered at that time, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, a total of 139 incidents were reported and processed by the Financial Crime Investigation Unit during 2022. That was a decrease of reported incidents when compared to 2021 by a number of about 37. Madam Speaker, the frontline services responded to over 35,000 calls to service in 2022, of which 3,810 were reported crimes. Madam Speaker, those are the types of matters that are reflected in the report. Madam Speaker, I commend the reading of the report to both members and the public. Madam Speaker, I just choose to highlight one or two additional matters that I think relate to incidents or issues that are very prevalent today, and I'm referring in particular to traffic accidents, of which we have far too many occurring on a daily basis, Madam Speaker. The RCIPS issued 9,308 tickets for traffic offences, and that was an increase of 2% over 2021. There was a total of 234 arrests for DUI. That was a reduction of 18% compared to 2021. Madam Speaker, there were also recoveries and seizures in relation to drugs in 2022, which were in excess of 1,400 pounds of ganja, 25 kilos of cocaine recovered during operations, and 30 kilograms of cocaine recovered from the beaches, which is a total for all three islands. I believe they call it square groupers, Madam Speaker. Not a good thing that we want washing up on our beaches. Madam Speaker, I will just commend the rest of the report to members, as I said, as well as of this Honourable House, as well as members of the public. It makes good reading and it reflects the good work that the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service have been providing in terms of safety and security for the people of this country, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
Ministry of District Administration and Lands, Cayman Islands Government, Annual Report and Financial Statements for the year ended 31st December 2021, to be laid on the table by the Honorable Deputy Premier, Minister of District Administration and Lands.
Honorable Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of this Honourable House the annual report and financial statements for the Ministry of District Administration and Lands for the year ending 31st of December 2021.
Does the Honorable Deputy Premier wish to speak thereto?
No, thank you, Madam Speaker.
Ministry of Investment, Innovation and Social Development, Cayman Islands Government, Annual Report 2022, to be laid on the table by the Honorable Minister of Investment, Innovation and Social Development.
The Honorable Minister of Investment, Innovation and Social Development.
Good afternoon, Madam Speaker. I beg to lay on the table of this Honourable House the Annual Report 2022 of the Ministry of Investment, Innovation and Social Development.
Does the Honorable Minister wish to speak thereto?
Very briefly, Madam Speaker. If you'd have asked me this morning, I would have probably said no. But as I looked over the report during lunch, I felt moved to. The tremendous body of work that occurred during 2022 of this ministry is worth a mention, Madam Speaker, because I'm incredibly proud of all of the officers that make up the ministries and its departments to have done massive projects such as the modernization of our welfare law, Madam Speaker, to a modern Financial Assistance Act, massive projects such as the Identification Register Bill, the National ID Program, and the Card Bill, which now acts of law. The tremendous work that I've mentioned in the House before in previous years of cybersecurity that are on the front lines of keeping our IT systems safe, that are probably at a risk of hacking every day. The Computer Services Department that provided over 8,000 hours of service to government users to maintain their hardware and software for 4,000 PCs. It's extraordinary. The work that the Business Development Center does, we spoke about it briefly in Finance Committee yesterday when the leader of the opposition quite rightly asked whether the Business Asset Stipend Program was complete. It was, and I'm pretty sure that although they helped to administer $4.3 million of that stipend program, which was innovative and one of the first of its kind in the Cayman Islands, that office was probably just as happy to get back to its original mandate as the tourism operators were as happy to get back to tourism business. And as they returned to their mandate, they had enormous impact on the community with helping micro and small businesses with programs that they administered in terms of learning how to raise capital. They've had entrepreneurship clubs, business growth, incubator programs. And Madam Speaker, you're pictured on page 13 as you delivered a speech on my behalf when you were acting for the Grow Your Business Level Up program, for the businesses that already got a chance and got started, but then needed to learn how to grow. The seed funding program is another way in which they help to raise money for small businesses, and that work is going to continue in 2023. So I just want to say thank you to all of the officers, there are too many to name, and also thank you to my colleagues, because the movement of policy and legislation would not have been done without them. And although he's not in the chamber, that would also include the member for Bodden Town West. To borrow his phrase, to give Jack his jacket, he was also part and contributed a strong contribution on the movement of the Financial Assistance Act. And thank you to the DG for helping to, the Deputy Governor for helping to implement and helping to operationalize some of these programs within the civil service. There's one that I want to highlight to the Deputy Governor that we need help with this year that's been planned in 2022, but hopefully executed, is a Think Small First program, in which the Business Development Center would like the civil service to adopt a stance in which all civil servants and policymakers think about the impact of their policy and legislation on small and micro businesses. I'm just immensely proud as I look at this work. 2022 was a stellar year. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Of Reg 2021 Annual Report to be laid on the table by the Honorable Minister of Border Control and Labor.
Honorable Minister of Border Control and Labor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I beg to lay on the table of this Honourable House the annual report of the Utility Regulation and Competition Office, or OFREG, for the financial period of ending 31st of December 2021.
Does Honorable Minister wish to speak thereto?
Madam Speaker, thank you. And just to say on behalf of the government, I wish to express our gratitude to the Board of Directors, especially Chairman Mr. Rudy Ebanks, the Interim Chief Executive Officer Mr. Peter Gaw, other senior management and staff for their assistance and support during the periods under review. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Cayman Islands Government 2022 Portfolio of the Civil Service Annual Report to be laid on the table by the Honorable Deputy Governor, ex officio member responsible for the portfolio of the Civil Service.
Honorable Deputy Governor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of this Honorable House the annual report for the portfolio of the Civil Service as of 31st of December 2022.
Does the Honorable Deputy Governor wish to speak thereto?
Yes, Madam Speaker, thank you. Madam Speaker, I shall offer remarks on the annual report for the portfolio of the Civil Service for the year ending 31st of December 2022. Madam Speaker, the portfolio of the Civil Service has 3 strategic areas of delivery: HR policy, public sector reform, and good governance. The portfolio is comprised of the Office of the Deputy Governor, the Policy Support Unit, the Civil Service College, the Management Support Unit, Strategic and Corporate HR, the National Archives, the Commission Secretariat, the Internal Audit Service, the Elections Office, the Office of Education Standards, and the Passport and Corporate Service Office. Madam Speaker, in 2022, POCS delivered some truly outstanding results, beginning with the introduction of the e-recruitment platform, www.careers.gov.ky, which went live in February, modernizing civil service recruitment by introducing an online application process. The new platform created a seamless user experience, allowing applicants to create a user profile, giving them 24 hours access to view vacancies and track application process, among other benefits. Customer feedback, which is sought automatically after the submission of every application, resulted in a customer satisfaction rating of 8.6 out of 10 immediately following launch, and we have maintained a rating of slightly over 8 ever since. Additionally, the POCS HR data team began the rollout of the Civil Service new human resource management system, MyVista, providing civil servants and HR professionals with access to key information and self-service options from one convenient online platform. With the introduction of MyVista, employees were able to manage leave requests, record time, work items against government priorities, and agree and document their annual objectives for the year. For civil service recruiters, MyVista introduced easy access to useful information on applicants, which modernized and simplified recruitment activity while simultaneously reducing manual paper-based processes. Between July and November 2022, the Management Support Unit, MSU, undertook important activities to refresh the Cayman Islands Government 5-year strategic plan after losing some implementation time on this critical initiative due to the global pandemic. The refresh commenced with activities to determine where we are on our journey to achieving our vision to become world-class, followed by ascertaining what actions are left to be completed. The outcome of this activity will shape future implementation plans and provide a revised roadmap to ensure that the CIG remains on track to achieve its vision. The MSU also continued work in the area of leadership coaching by facilitating the second annual 360-degree leadership review and coaching exercise, which brought 594 civil service leaders together with experienced coaches to discuss survey feedback and develop and implement leadership development plans. Madam Speaker, for the 6th consecutive year, POCS facilitated the delivery of the annual Employee Engagement Survey, which in 2022 yielded responses from 87% of the 3,717 civil servants. The engagement index, which is a measure of the average level of engagement across all civil service entities, increased 1% from 2021, rising to 73%. Madam Speaker, a score that I'm particularly keen to see every year is a score in response to the statement, "I feel proud to be a civil servant." In the survey, Madam Speaker, 89% of respondents stated that they were proud to work for the civil service. This score gives me great joy and satisfaction, as I'm glad that so many employees share the same pride about working for the civil service as I do. While pay and reward still remains the lowest score in the survey category, with a score of 41%, this score has increased by 12% since the inception of the survey in 2017. The data increases over the years can be accredited to a number of pay and rewards initiatives that have been implemented by POCS, the most recent of which occurred in 2022 and featured distinct components to address the rising cost of living, facilitate pay progression for persons on salary grades E and below, and to gradually reduce the extent of overlap within salary grades. As a result of the implementation of the 2022 pay remedies, the vast majority of civil servants, approximately 94%, saw a permanent increase of 4.5% in their salaries. A number of honorariums were also paid during the year, including 3 payments totaling $450 to staff on salary grades E and below to help offset increased fuel costs, and a special one-time payment made in December to those employees who had already achieved the highest pay point on their respective salary grades. And I wish to record my thanks to the government for their support in these pay initiatives to our civil servants. During the year, the Civil Service College continued to deliver multiple streams of learning, which resulted in over 200 civil servants achieving internationally recognized City and Guilds ILM qualifications in leadership and management. 45 civil servants graduating with associate degrees in public administration, and over 32,000 on-demand learning courses, reflecting 7,000 hours of learning being accessed via LinkedIn Learning. The Office of Education Standards, OES, continued inspecting schools across the Cayman Islands, including completing 30 thematic visits and 21 full inspections. In completing their inspections, the OES noted that improvements had been implemented by schools' leadership in all government secondary schools, and notably confirmed the elimination of weak ratings across all government schools. These inspection results demonstrated that Cayman is making progress in the area of primary and secondary education, which is something that many countries have struggled to achieve over the pandemic period. In the area of governance, the Internal Audit Service continued to add value by providing almost 1,200 hours of assistant and advisory services to various government entities, as well as produced 12 compliance reports and completed a number of special investigations. When implemented, the audit recommendations stemming from the work of the IAS will ensure stronger internal controls and governance practices across the service. In my own office, my capable team led numerous cross-cutting and important initiatives in an effort to make the lives of those we serve better. We continue to provide secretarial services that support the effective operation of a range of boards and committees, such as the Expungement Board, helping them to achieve good governance objectives and deliver benefits to some of our most vulnerable citizens. Through the professional certification program also offered by the SRIU, 65 civil servants have earned a combined total of 82 certifications in critical areas such as business case development, project management, and change management. Madam Speaker, and I think you share the same vision with me, Madam Speaker, in terms of keeping healthy. Much to my delight, the Deputy Governor's 5K Challenge returned to the annual events calendar in the Cayman Islands government following a brief pause caused by COVID. and I'm very proud to say that we raised a record sum of $96,000, which was shared equally among some very deserving charities, the Cayman Islands Cancer Society, the MS Foundation of the Cayman Islands, and the Alzheimer's and Dementia Association of the Cayman Islands. Since establishing the 5K Challenge in 2014, Madam Speaker, it has raised almost $500,000 for various charities or charitable organizations within the Cayman Islands. Madam Speaker, to commemorate her late Majesty, the Queen, Platinum Jubilee, the Cayman Islands National Archives partnered with Parliament to develop and install a Platinum Jubilee exhibit. Additionally, the National Archives collaborated with the Cabinet Office to reproduce items from historical collections in honor of Her late Majesty, the Queen. 2022 also marked the 50th anniversary of the Parliament building, which led the National Archives to develop a second special exhibit during the year. For me, Madam Speaker, 2022 was a memorable year, not only because I celebrated 10 years as Deputy Governor, but also because it was a year in which POCS delivered world-class outcomes, from the introduction of recruitment platforms, which attracted over 12,000 user account registration in the first 8 months, to the marked improvement in our government schools, to our ability to quickly respond to the rising cost of living by implementing pay solutions for our staff. POCS rose to the challenge and delivered. The year was certainly one that I am very proud of, and one that, if replicated in 2023 and beyond, we will see even more solutions and successes, all of which will enhance the services we provide and will make the lives of those we serve much better. Madam Speaker, I would like to especially recognize the Chief Officer for the portfolio of the Civil Service, Ms. Gloria McField-Nixon, her Deputy, Lauren and Ryan, her CFO, Ms. Nadisha, and the amazing team in the portfolio of the Civil Service for their work and for delivering another solid year of outstanding performance. I would also like to thank the team in my office, led by Ms. Rodriguez, Jody Scott, and Matthew Hilton. And I want to recognize my PA, Tanisha Ebanks, also for their hard work and dedication and providing me with the necessary assistance for me to perform my duties. Madam Speaker, I thank you.
Questions to honorable ministers and members of the Cabinet. The elected member for Georgetown South to ask the Honorable Minister of Health and Wellness, question 27.
The elected member for Georgetown South.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to ask the Honourable Minister question number 27 on the order paper standing in my name. Question: can the Honourable Minister advise whether the mental health facility is still on track to be handed over at the end of June 2023?
Honourable Minister for Health and Wellness.
Madam Speaker, answer. Based on the latest update from the project managers of the Ponciana Residential Mental Health Facility, located in High Rock East End, I am pleased that the facility remains on track to be handed over at the end of June 2023. I have shared for my colleagues of this Honourable House a picture attached to my response that reflects the progress in pictures of covering 15 months from February 2022 to May of 2023.
Elected member for Georgetown South.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wonder if the Honourable Minister could advise when it will become operational. Do we have a time frame for that?
Honourable Minister for Health and Wellness.
As I have been informed, we're waiting for the handover, which is still on track as previously stated in June. The actual operation date, we will inform, but I will inform my colleagues and yourselves as soon as that exact date becomes available to me.
The 1 minute, honorable member. Just for the elected member for Georgetown South to continue with her questioning, and then leader of the opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Honourable Minister, in terms of recruiting all of the relevant staff, specialists for the facility, any idea when that will occur?
Honourable Minister for Health and Wellness.
Madam Speaker, through you, the ministry has identified a director for the facility, and it is in the final stage of that completion, the recruitment process I'm referring to, and an announcement will be made in due course once finalized. Now, the recruitment process for other key senior management posts have also begun, and it is expected that the director will play a key role with this.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
No need, ma'am. She asked the question I was going to ask.
Statements by honorable ministers and members of the cabinet.
I have given leave to the Honourable Premier to make a statement.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to make a statement in accordance with Section 11(6) of the Public Management and Finance Act, 2020 revision. Madam Speaker, this is regarding a cabinet decision under Section 11(5) of the Act to reallocate supplementary funding within the Ministry of Sustainability and Climate Resiliency between equity investments to executive assets. So I think, Madam Speaker, by reference to that, members will understand that this relates to the matter which was dealt with yesterday in Finance Committee in terms of the reallocation from an EI for an equity injection to executive assets. So, Madam Speaker, this reallocation of approved funding is to cover the costs related to the Georgetown landfill remediation works in relation to the Regen project. By way of background, Madam Speaker, and to give some context, the Ministry of Sustainability and Climate Resiliency has a management responsibility to bring the Regen project to financial close. However, prior to 1st January 2022, the funding for the project was managed under the Ministry of Health and Wellness, which was formerly the Ministry of Health, Environment, Culture, and Housing. Madam Speaker, in March 2021, the Cayman Islands government, under the former Ministry of Health and Environment, signed a project agreement to enter into a contract with the DART Consortium to design, build, finance, maintain, and operate a new integrated solid waste management system for a 25-year period. Alongside this, but in a separate and binding agreement, which is the early works agreement, was approval for the DART Consortium to undertake closure and remediation work to the Georgetown landfill. Madam Speaker, it may be of interest to note that this agreement is to begin to close and remediate the Georgetown landfill, which you will be aware is the only facility available to manage solid waste in Grand Cayman. And this was entered into by the previous administration in October 2020, several months before they signed the March 2021 project agreement. Madam Speaker, as members of the House, can I ask, Madam Speaker, just for clarity, as to whether the copy of the statement has been distributed
No, I've just asked for that to be distributed to members.
They were. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and apologies. I thought they had been distributed for the benefit of members. So, Madam Speaker, as members of the House, well, let me give members the opportunity. I am on page 2 of 5, the beginning of the second paragraph on that page. Madam Speaker, as members of the House will be aware, the general election took place in April 2021, and then in October 2021, the government announced that the responsibility for the project, the Regen project, and the Georgetown landfill remediation would transition to the Ministry of Sustainability and Climate Resiliency. Madam Speaker, the project and the details of the contract are currently still under negotiation. There are a number of aspects that are deemed to be commercially very sensitive. Madam Speaker, in April 2022, the Ministry of Sustainability and Climate Resiliency announced that the Cabinet had approved the continuation of negotiations or negotiation discussions with the preferred public-private partner by way of an extension to the financial close deadline and long-stop date for the project. Project agreement negotiations between the Cayman Islands government and the DART Consortium for the development of the Regen project. The financial close is expected to occur, Madam Speaker, no later than July 31st, 2023. However, Madam Speaker, it's important to note that the agreement to facilitate the Georgetown landfill closure and remediation work is a separate agreement, and that agreement will continue regardless of the project, of the progress of the Regen project. Madam Speaker, when the 2022-23 budget period was approved, an amount of CI $21,657,088 and CI $2,272,847 for 2022 and 2023 respectively was allocated to the Ministry of Sustainability and Climate Resiliency under the appropriation reference EI 84 in respect of the Georgetown landfill remediation works, which is part of the Regen project. This approval was in line with how these costs had previously been allocated under the former ministry. In January 2022, Madam Speaker, the Ministry of Sustainability and Climate Resiliency began to manage these costs and have determined that the expenditure for the Georgetown landfill remediation works under the early work agreement should have been budgeted as an executive asset appropriation rather than an equity injection. Madam Speaker, in order to determine whether the expenditure related to the Georgetown landfill remediation works are to be classified as executive or entity-related appropriations, consideration was given to whether the remediation works were being undertaken in order to produce entity outputs or to carry out any other activities under the ministry's remit. The ministry also considered the definitions of each category of asset within the Public Management and Finance Act 2020 revision. Entity assets are defined in the PMFA as all assets controlled by that entity for the purpose of producing its outputs, but does not include any asset of the core government declared by the Financial Secretary not to be assets of that entity or allocated or transferred by the Financial Secretary to another entity by regulations under Section 35 of the law. Madam Speaker, it was decided that the Georgetown landfill remediation works did not fit the definition for entity expenditure or entity assets and should therefore be classified as executive expenditure in accordance with the PMFA definition of executive assets, which is all assets of the core government other than entity assets, and includes the equity investments of the government in ministries, portfolios, statutory authorities, government companies, the Office of the Ombudsman, and the Audit Office, but does not include assets held by the government as trustee for another person. This, Madam Speaker, is the basis of the exceptional circumstance for which this reallocation was required to be made. Accordingly, Cabinet had authorized the reallocation of funds approved under EI 84, Equity Investments to the Ministry of Sustainability and Climate Resiliency, to EA 165, Georgetown Landfill Remediation Works, executive asset, in accordance with Section 11.5 and 11.6 of the Public Management and Finance Act 2020 revision. In so doing, Madam Speaker, funding in output EI 84 under the Ministry of Sustainability and Climate Resiliency for the 2022 financial year was decreased by $21,657,088, and a new output, EA 165, Georgetown Landfill Remediation Works, for the 2022 fiscal year was increased by the same amount. So it didn't change the budgeted amounts, it just reallocated it, Madam Speaker. So also for the 2023 financial year, EI 84 was decreased by $2,272,847, and a new output, EA 165, Georgetown Landfill Remediation Works, for the 2023 financial year was increased by the same amount. Madam Speaker, Cabinet also approved the carry forward of the unused portions, which was $16,086,757 to fiscal year 23. Madam Speaker, I'd like to be clear. Again, this was a net zero transaction. It did not result in any increase in budgeted expenditure. It was simply a reallocation in order to better reflect the appropriate or relevant appropriation title, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, in considering this reallocation, Cabinet have been advised by the Ministry that the proposed changes would not have any impact on the government's financial performance relative to the 2022 financial year. And, Madam Speaker, I hope this provides sufficient clarity for those who followed Finance Committee yesterday, and then this statement today, Madam Speaker, is in compliance with the Public Management and Finance Act, and in particular, Section 11.6, relating specifically to this process of changing the budgeted value from the equity injection title to executive assets, but the amounts were not changed. So in closing, Madam Speaker, I'd like to thank the Ministry's finance team, the Ministry of Finance, and colleagues for their support in the proper classification of this expenditure related to the Georgetown Landfill Remediation Works. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Premier. Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just wondering if I would rise on the relevant section 32, I think, of the standing orders, just to allow for a short question of the Premier.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Premier, perhaps the Premier could indicate to us whether there has been any significant change in the scope the project, of the regen project that is being funded and it is being negotiated.
Madam Speaker, I thank the member for the question. Of course, that has been the subject of a private member's question, and that is a matter that is going to be responded to, Madam Speaker. I'm obviously not prepared. I can give an off-the-cuff sort of high-level perspective on it, but I would prefer to put it in writing so that it is very clear, and I'm happy to circulate that to all members, Madam Speaker. But in general, I will say that in terms of any changes in scope, those primarily occurred and I'm trying to say this carefully, the majority of them, if there were any, since April 2021, were very limited. The majority related to changes in scope that occurred prior to March 2021. The biggest of those, I think, relating to the upsizing of the facility because of a reassessment of the level of waste that the facility would need to be designed to accommodate, not just today, but over the long period of the life of this project, which is anticipated, once it's operational, to be at least 25 years. But Madam Speaker, I am happy to provide a full answer in writing to all members of this Honourable House in respect of the question.
I've also given leave to the Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness to make a statement.
Madam Speaker, thank you. Understanding the time of the day, I will be as quickly and as brief as I can. But I'd like to take the opportunity to provide this Honourable Parliament with an overview of the progress and current activities of the Ministry of Home Affairs. Since taking on the responsibility of the Ministry of Home Affairs in April 2022, I have strategically steered my ministry team in the direction of national policy, meaningful legislation, enhanced partnerships and alignment, and increased public awareness. I have done so with vigor, fully understanding the essential role of home affairs in the smooth functioning of our beloved country. The synergies, Madam Speaker, in alignment with my role as Minister for Health and Wellness has positioned me to be a champion for the continued advancement of key policies and initiatives for public safety. The Strategic Policy Statement for 2024 to 2026 recognizes the importance of the Ministry of Home Affairs deliberately shifting to becoming an intelligence-led ministry to ensure that our national policies and solutions are based on a deep and comprehensive understanding of the enduring security and public safety issues facing our islands. This focus, Madam Speaker, has been internationally embedded within the SPS to show how the Ministry of Home Affairs intends to support this government's broad outcomes and strategic priorities. Madam Speaker, I would like to begin with sharing developments in the area of legislation and policies. In the last 6 months, Cabinet has granted approval for amendments to 2 pieces of legislation in addition to a government policy for halfway houses. In December 2022, Cabinet approved the issuing of drafting instructions to amend the Cadet Corps Act 2021 revision and drafting instructions to establish Cadet Corps regulations. Madam Speaker, amendments to the existing Cadet Corps Act and the drafting of the Cadet Corps regulations will ensure the effective operations of the Cayman Islands Cadet Corps at regional and international standards. In April 2023, Cabinet approved the development of the Cayman Islands government policy for substance recovery centers, also known as halfway houses. This policy, Madam Speaker, provides consistent requirements and minimum standards for substance recovery centers who obtain funding from the Cayman Islands government. Lastly, Madam Speaker, in May 2023, Cabinet approved the issuing of drafting instructions to amend the Criminal Procedural Code 2021, Part 7, procedure relating to persons found insane. Madam Speaker, amendments to this legislation will enhance the governor's powers to conditionally discharge, where appropriate, an individual who the court has found not guilty by reason of insanity and conveyed to the hospital until discharged by the governor. Madam Speaker, having received Cabinet's approval for these mentioned legislative amendments, the Ministry of Home Affairs is in coordination and consultation stage of the legislative drafting process in order to provide synthesized documents and instructions to the legal drafting department for both the Cadet Corps Act and the Criminal Procedure Code. Madam Speaker, the aim is to have these draft bills out for public consultation and before Parliament by the end of 2023. The Ministry of Home Affairs, Madam Speaker, has conducted a comprehensive assessment of legislative and policy gaps across the Ministry of Home Affairs entities and developed a prioritized schedule of proposals submissions to Cabinet. I am committed to continuing to advocate for meaningful legislative and policy amendments. One example, Madam Speaker, is a proposal to repeal and replace the Prison Act 2021, as well as the Prison Rules 1999 revision and the Prison Officer Discipline Regulations 1998 revision. This proposal, which is in its final stages of consultation, modernizes the current outdated legislation and will be forthcoming for Cabinet's consideration in the current quarter. A second example of ongoing policy proposals that will be forthcoming from the Ministry of Home Affairs, Madam Speaker, is a proposal to establish a cross-ministerial mental health program board to continue implementing the recommendations made within Dr. Jim Hard's review of mental health provision within His Majesty's Cayman Islands Prison Service. This proposal enhances accountability within the Cayman Islands government in order to effectively strengthen mental health services across the criminal justice system. In addition to the key legislative and positive policy initiatives I have spoken to, Madam Speaker, the Ministry of Home Affairs is focused on advancing public safety in the Cayman Islands based on an overarching intelligence-driven 3-year strategic plan that aligns with this government strategic policy statement. This strategic plan focuses on implementing strategies in people development, wellness, business, excellence, partnership and alignment, and public awareness. The Ministry of Home Affairs, Madam Speaker, has a number of ongoing projects and initiatives. Madam Speaker, a number of these were reported in the Ministry of Home Affairs midterm report in May of 2023, but I'd like to use this forum to emphasize my commitment to bringing these objectives over the finish line during my time as Minister of Home Affairs. There are 10 priority objectives identified, which I would like to share briefly, Madam Speaker. The amendment and/or development of 4 of 7 key legislation to enhance governance in public safety, as well as 3 to 6 national policy initiatives, including commissioning the Substance Recovery Center policy, the completion of a master design plan for a fit-for-purpose built prison estate, Madam Speaker, we may not be in a financial position to move forward with the construction of a new prison, but I am committed to supporting His Majesty Prison Service with maintaining the existing facilities at an acceptable level where progressing the design of the new facility. Madam Speaker, there is significant ongoing works in the areas of prison reform, offender management, and rehabilitation reform. The aim of the Ministry of Home Affairs is to implement effective strategies through a proposed national rehabilitation policy, substance recovery center policy, offender management framework, and implementation of mental health program board. Madam Speaker, based on the evolving needs of our country, we must support the necessary equipment and infrastructure of our public safety entities. This would include the replacement of aging ladder trucks and appliances for the sister islands, the completion of the Georgetown Central Bay expansion and storage project, and replacement of prison vehicles for the secure transport of prisoners. I am also pleased to note, Madam Speaker, that the replacement vehicles for the prisons are electric vehicles, supporting this government's sustainable development goals. Madam Speaker, the development of the new fire operational policies and legislation remains a priority for the Ministry of Home Affairs, developing and implementing new emergency response driving policies and an urban search and rescue USAR framework are critical initiatives that the ministry is committed to. Madam Speaker, I reference the unfortunate major incident that took place just this week in Newlands area as an example to highlight the need to coordinate the urban search and rescue framework. As a country, we must not be complacent. We must assess the hazards and risks that we faced in an evolving environment and equip our emergency responders with the appliances, equipment, skills, and to respond to incidents safely in a coordinated manner to save lives and property. In addition to the appropriate framework and policies, I am committed to supporting the Ministry of Home Affairs entities with establishing safe systems of work to achieve optimal levels of safety and enhanced delivery of services. Madam Speaker, to support effective public safety communications and networks, the completion and operation of the new Northward Radio Tower and bunker is a priority project for the Ministry of Home Affairs. This, of course, Madam Speaker, will also require the decommissioning and disconnection of the old Northward Radio Tower. Upgrading and expanding the national CCTV program, Madam Speaker, continues to be a project of great importance as well. This expansion will include Cayman Brac, Madam Speaker, and to my colleagues from the sister islands, and placements will be guided by intelligence and data. Madam Speaker, the Emergency Alert System pilot project for older persons is an initiative that the Department of Public Safety Communications will provide support to the Ministry of Investment, Innovation, and Social Development, who will take lead with this project. If this pilot program is accessed and successful, Madam Speaker, Ministry of Home Affairs will continue to support the development of a planned and expand the program. Last but certainly not least, Madam Speaker, it is my commitment to defense and humanitarian response and youth development through advanced training and development programs for the Cayman Islands Regiment and Cadet Corps. I'm committed to recruiting and developing local military-style and cadet talent, to implementing clear legislation and policies as evidenced by cadets approved to amend the Cadet Corps Act, and the ongoing work on the governor's orders to enhance governance and create consistent standards for military-type services. Madam Speaker, as I conclude, I would like to extend my deepest gratitude to the Acting Chief Officer of Home Affairs, Mr. Michael E. Banks, as well as the entire ministry staff, including Mr. Julian Lewis, who acted in the capacity of Acting Chief Officer for the last year. I would also like to especially thank the men and women of Home Affairs who operate in various departments on the front line. We often take for granted that these civil servants are in extremely challenging jobs. Their daily work to help the public through their worst days. Now, they're the ones who are running into storms or fires, even taking someone through their worst crisis, working with high-risk people, and the list goes on, Madam Speaker. The critical incident of this week serves as a reminder of just that. Now, let me leave us with one of my favorite sayings by Coretta Scott King. The greatest of a community is most accurately measured by the compassionate actions of its members. The Home Affairs, Madam Speaker, embodies this quote, and I issue the challenge for all of us to do the same. Thank you.
Personal explanations.
None.
Obituary and other ceremonial speeches.
None.
Raising of matters of privileges.
None.
Other business. Private members' motions. Private members' motion number 16 of 2022-2023. Interest rates, to be moved by the elected member for West Bay West and seconded by the elected member for Bordentown West.
The elected member for West Bay West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to move private member's motion number 16, standing in my name, which reads as follows. Whereas the Cayman Islands are experiencing a tremendously high level of cost of living, and whereas the banks have increased their loan and mortgage rates several times recently, be it therefore resolved that government considers meeting immediately with the local banking and money lending institutions to discuss reducing interest rates immediately and not increasing interest rates for the next 24 months. And be it further resolved that government considers amending legislation to establish an interest rate setting body.
Is there a seconder to the motion? The elected member for Bordentown West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to second the motion.
The motion has been moved and seconded and is now open for debate. Does the mover of the motion wish to speak thereto, or does the mover intend to move an amendment to the motion at this time?
Madam Speaker, I have tabled an amendment, and I would prefer to have that incorporated and then debate the full motion all in one. So if I'm allowed, I would move on to the amendment.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In accordance with the provisions of Standing Order 25(1) and 2, I, the elected member for West Bay West, seek to move the following amendment to private members' motion number 16. Inserting a third resolved section. The new third resolved section will read, be it therefore further resolved that the government considers further restructuring the Cayman Islands Development Bank to be able to accept deposits to assist with lending to our people.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for the amendment of the private member motion number 16?
Madam Speaker, I rise to second the motion.
The amendment has been moved and seconded. Does the mover wish to speak on the amendment?
No, Madam Speaker. I would prefer, as I said, to move forward with debating the full motion. But of course, you have to, I will read the full motion now. And, well, I think you have to vote on the amendment to get it included in the full motion.
Before we put it to vote, does anyone wish to speak to the amendment now before we vote? The question is that the motion be amended as follows: by inserting a third resolved section. The new resolved section will read, "Be it therefore further resolved that the government considers further restructuring the Cayman Islands Development Bank to be able to accept deposits to assist with the lending to our people." All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. The ayes have it. The amendment to private members' motion number 16 of 2022-2023 is duly passed. The motion as amended is now open for debate. Does the mover of the motion wish to speak to the amended motion?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, just to read the full motion as it stands. Whereas the Cayman Islands are experiencing a tremendously high level of cost of living, and whereas the banks here have increased their loan and mortgage rates several times recently, be it therefore resolved that government considers meeting immediately with the local banking and money lending institutions to discuss reducing interest rates immediately and not increasing interest rates for the next 24 months. And be it further resolved that government considers amending legislation to establish an interest rate setting body. Be it therefore further resolved that the government considers further restructuring the Cayman Islands Development Bank to be able to accept deposits to assist with lending to our people. Madam Speaker, there is no doubt that the subject matter of the motion is an important one. There is no doubt that the increases in interest rates are wreaking havoc to families and possibly business. I have reports of rate increases causing mortgage payments to increase as much as $1,000 to families. How can a middle-income person sustain that? But think, Madam Speaker and honorable members, of lower-income persons who has a mortgage and loans that go up by $200 when that family is already having difficulty in paying mortgage and other bills. Madam Speaker and honorable members, there could not be a worse time to increase rates than at this time, and not only increase it one time, but several times. Madam Speaker, one very intelligent lady wrote, I think most of us got that, although it was on a matter of pensions, but she said, as you, and I quote from an email, I think most members have that, as you are aware of the severely negative financial and economic impact which have grossly affected many Caymanians over the past 3 to 5 years, we now currently find in 2023 the financial and economic situation has gravely worsened by the following factors, which by no means is an exhaustive list. The constant increases in the interest rates for mortgages and other loans in 2023, and with further interest rates for 2023 being considered by the federal government in the United States of America. Increases in home insurance premiums. Members spoke passionately yesterday about what is happening with dwelling insurance, building insurance in this country. Increase of cost of living, food, gas, Caribbean Utilities Company, and vehicle fuel. Caribbean Utilities Company bills going up by over $900, nearly $1,000 on a middle-income family of four children, 2 parents, family of 6. Mine, I know, went up by $580. I know other people. And as I said yesterday, Madam Speaker, these things is what is harming and damaging and making our people feel that this House is not doing enough to do something to help them. And that is not just 1 or 2 people, that's a widespread feeling across this country. People just cannot take any more. Increase in inflation, which is anticipated to go higher in 2023, and in many of the private sector, no cost of living increases are no longer being given. Little or no change have been made to salaries for the past 3 years. End of quote. Madam Speaker, I'm dealing with interest rates and what is happening in the banks, but Madam Speaker, the whole cost of living in this country is destroying families. And no matter how much we help, we give how many millions for the children for breakfast and lunch and a break. But at the end of the month, parents are having most difficult time in paying bills, buying food. Madam Speaker, those are the things that are concerning our people. And Madam Speaker, I note that our Premier has made a statement in regards to what steps he has tried to take with the banking sector. He's saying he has talked to the banks, but from what I can gather from his statement, he's basically saying he can't do anything with the banks, and he is offering ideas to help people with the cost of living. I believe he's trying. He wants to do something. But I don't think I can agree with him that there is not something that can be done. Madam Speaker, in representing our people, we must find ways. We must take the bull by the horns, because this is not just something today. We have had increases, not as much over the years. They didn't last long. And then there were governments who said, we will find a way, you know. So you better talk to us. You better listen. You better understand. And I recall Caribbean Utilities raising 1 month in the worst conditions at that time, and then wanting to come, I think, the same year. And we simply told them, if you do it, we can go to court. And they back down. They back down. I don't believe either, Madam Speaker, in this sing-song about the banks will leave. I don't believe that. Some of them are already cutting back operations anyway. Didn't we just had an announcement from one saying no more over-the-counter transactions. Now do it online. So what happened to the vast majority, particularly so of our seniors who can't go online? What's happening? Madam Speaker, I don't buy this idea that we can't do anything. This parliament is elected to do something, and we must find ways and do it, and not listen to this sing-song about we can't do this and we can't do that, and you want them to leave? I believe that we can do something. We are elected to govern, not to find excuses and do nothing. Madam Speaker, before I move on, let me take that last, or the second resolve, which says, be it further resolved that government considers amending legislation to establish an interest rate setting body. Madam Speaker, I am not saying in that statement, in that resolve, I'm not saying that those or there would be a rate setting body, and that is a separate law or otherwise appointed. I don't believe that. I believe that there are laws that we can utilize. I don't want another commission where we got to fight and they got to go get a consultant. No, I don't believe in that. And I don't know how many can agree with me, but that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that we have the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority, who is our only regulatory body, and the rate setting could come to the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority, since we don't have a central bank, Madam Speaker, which in other countries control the currency, deals with financial institutions, and sets interest rates. So I'm not saying, Madam Speaker, that we must go now because I have asked for this. I am not saying that we must go and set up some separate group, some committee, ad hoc. No, 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 no. I am saying, and I'll repeat it, we have the monetary authority. We can find a way through that, since we don't have a central bank. Madam Speaker, in moving this motion and thinking about this, and so many complaints coming to my office, coming to my phone, walking up to me, I can't pay my month bills, I can't pay my loan, I can't pay Caribbean utilities. I said, okay, as we have talked around this and talked about it, let's see if we can do something. Government has said they have talked, or some of them have talked to some banks. I don't know who these banks were and what they said entirely, except for what our Premier has said. As I said, I don't believe in stopping there. So I talked to people, and I think I got an understanding of how these interest rates come about. And let me start with a key definition and analysis, which is the US prime rate, or prime as it is called for short. What happens? What is the prime rate? The prime rate is the interest rate that commercial banks charge their most creditworthy customers. The Federal Reserve System sets the federal funds overnight rate, which serves as the basis for the prime rate, which is the starting point for other interest rates. The prime rate, which is sometimes simply referred to as prime, is the most commonly used benchmark used by banks and other lenders when setting their interest rates for various products such as credit cards and home loans. The key point here, Madam Speaker, is that prime is used as the base rate primarily for short-term lending, not for long-term loans. Now, Madam Speaker, how the prime rate works. Interest rates are a percentage of the amount that lenders charge on any loans they grant to people who are borrowing. It acts as a form of compensation for the risk that lenders assume based on the borrower's credit history and other financial details. These rates are normally noted annually as the annual percentage rates. The prime rate is the interest rate that commercial banks charge their most creditworthy customers, generally large corporations. The prime interest rate, which is also called the prime lending rate, is largely determined by the federal funds rate set by the Federal Open Market Committee. The federal funds rate is the overnight rate banks use to lend to one another. Banks commonly use a combination of the federal funds rate plus 3 to determine the prime rate. As noted above, Madam Speaker, lenders charge their most creditworthy clients the prime rate for mortgages, small business loans, or personal loans. For others, the prime rate forms the basis or starting point for most other interest rates. The interest these borrowers are charged, which is based on their credit scores and credit histories, is normally prime plus a certain percentage. Those who have a good credit score would be charged, say, something like prime plus 9% for a credit card, while those with a lower credit score may get a rate of prime plus 15%. Now, how is they go about determining the prime rate? The prime rate is an interest rate determined by individual banks and used as a base rate for many types of loans, including loans to small businesses and credit cards. Although the Federal Reserve has no direct role in setting the prime rate for banks, many financial institutions chose to set their prime rates based partly on the target level of the federal funds rate established by the FOMC. One of the most used prime rates is the one that the Wall Street Journal publishes daily. And as noted above, Madam Speaker, banks generally use federal funds plus 3 to determine the current prime rate. The prime rate in the United States is 8.25% as of May this year, last month, while the federal funds rate is set at a target of between 5% and 5.25%. The prime rate has been increasing since May 2022, since last year, approximately the same time that the Fed started increasing the federal funds rate to combat high inflation. That's what they said. Although other United States financial services institutions regularly note any changes that the Feds make to its prime rate and may use them to justify changes to its prime rate, institutions are not required to raise their prime rates following the Feds. They are not required to raise their prime rates following the Feds. And then what is the impact of those prime rates? The prime rates affects a variety of bank loans. When the prime rate goes up, so does the cost to access small business loans and lines of credits, car loans, mortgages, and credit card interest rates. So debt with a variable interest rate can be affected by the prime rate because a bank can charge your rate. This includes credit cards as well as variable rate mortgages, home equity loans, personal loans, and variable interest rate student loans. The prime rates is reserved for only the most qualified customers, those who pose the least amount of default risk. Prime rates may not be available to individual people who borrow, but are offered to large entities such as corporations and stable businesses. If the prime rate is set at 5%, a lender still may offer rates between 5% to well-qualified customers. These rates are not considered mandatory minimums. Now, how does the prime rate affect people who borrow? The prime rate is not fixed and can change over time based on changes in the federal funds rate, inflation, the demand for loans, and other economic factors. When the prime rate changes, the interest rates on loans and financial products that are based on the prime rate may also change. The prime rate affects us, you and me and others, in a number of ways, depending on the type of loan or financial product we may have. One, home equity loans. If a person borrowing has a home equity loan or home equity line of credit, the interest rate on the loan may be based on the prime rate. If the prime rate increases, the interest rate on the home equity loan may also increase, leading to higher monthly payments for the person who is borrowing. Two, adjustable rate mortgages. If a borrower has that kind of mortgage that is tied to the prime rate, an interest or an increase in the prime rate may lead to an increase in the interest rate on the mortgage, resulting in a higher monthly payment for the borrower. Three, credit card balances. If a borrower has a credit card with a variable interest rate, the interest rate may be based on the prime rate. If the prime rate increases, the interest rate on the credit card may also increase, leading to higher interest charges for the borrower. Four, small business loans. If a small business loan or a small business has a loan with an interest rate based on the prime rate, an increase in the prime rate may lead to an increase in the interest rate on the loan, resulting in higher loan payments for the business. Madam Speaker, what is most important is that the prime rate is a short-term rate. It is not, and I repeat, it is not the same as the mortgage rate. In fact, for the 30-year mortgage rate in the United States is currently less than the prime rate. So why is that? Banks and lending institutions price their 30-year mortgage product based on the real cost of capital. Banks do not go out and raise capital based on prime and then lend it to individuals for 40 years in the form of a mortgage. I don't see that. I guess that would be crazy. If that were the case, then 30-year mortgage rates in the United States would always be higher than the prime rate, but that is not so either. Madam Speaker, here's the bottom line. At present, U.S. prime is 8.25%, and the 30-year fixed mortgage is 6.7%. So, colleagues, the 30-year fixed mortgage rate is 1.6%, 1.68% lower than prime. Here in Cayman, we are paying prime plus for our long-term loans and mortgages. We can go on bank websites and see rates advertised such as prime plus 2%. Therefore, a 30-year variable rate mortgage in Cayman is currently averaging 10.25%. So a consumer in Cayman is paying 10.25%, and that could increase depending on what the Federal Reserve in the U.S. does for that economy, and the average U.S. consumer is paying 6.57% for a 30-year fixed mortgage rate. What I am saying is, Madam Speaker, that a rise in interest rates may be justified if we want to be fair and can understand. But, Madam Speaker, not prime plus for mortgages. Prime is used as the base for short-term loan products. We must ensure, and this is what our job is, we must ensure that banks do not arbitrarily use this prime plus methodology in our economy if it is not their true cost of capital. But do we want to do that? Do we want to stand up? Do we want to say no? Madam Speaker, the news is even more dire because the United States Bureau of Labor Statistics reported 339,000 jobs were added in May. That's in the United States, surpassing forecasts that predicted the increase would be approximately 190,000 jobs. And it is a sign of continued growth from the job markets despite the Federal Reserve's continuing efforts to cool the economy. Economists and other experts are predicting that the Feds may well raise interest rates yet again. Seems, Madam Speaker, there is no end in sight for the average Caymanian. So we have to act differently to find ways to help our people. Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, this continuing spiral will certainly lead to increased foreclosures. It will lead to less Caymanians qualifying for mortgages, and therefore an overall slowing down of our economy. So none of this is any good for our people. None. None of it. Madam Speaker, hopefully I am clear in what I'm saying, that currently the Cayman Islands prime rate is a rate agreed between the street banks operating in the Cayman Islands without the oversight from the regulator or government. This is unusual as it lends itself to the very risk of anti-competitive or cartel-type practices. Yes. The cost of the Cayman Island dollar is not strictly linked to the cost of the United States dollar. Rather, Madam Speaker, the cost of the Cayman Islands dollar is based on other factors, including what the bank must pay for interest on customer CI bank accounts and the costs that arise from loan losses for the Cayman Island loans. The cost of the Cayman Islands dollars to the bank is then significantly offset by the revenue generated by the Cayman Islands dollar to the US dollar exchange rate, as established by law here, as well as other Cayman Islands denominated banking fees received by the banks from Cayman consumers. So overall, the Cayman Islands dollar is a significant revenue source for the banks in the Cayman Islands. Banks can earn between a 2 to 4% spread when a consumer converts Cayman Islands dollars to US dollars and vice versa. This size of spread is generally unheard of in any other countries where the two currencies are pegged together. If we assume conservatively and let's think of this, if we assume conservatively US $1 billion in total imports into the Cayman Islands and an average 2% spread, this would mean an additional $20 million fees generated from its CI dollar Cayman customers. And you might say, well, that's not so much in our economy, but that's theirs, not ours. We're not getting nothing out of it. Compared to other jurisdictions where most of the Cayman banks operate, the Cayman Islands have consistently experienced very low loan defaults. This means that the cost of Cayman Island funds to the banks are not increased because of loan defaults. Accordingly, as far as I'm concerned, there is no justification in Cayman where higher interest rates charged to consumers could be explained by higher credit risk due to defaults. They can't say that. When we were in a low interest rate environment, the banks significantly raised various fees. I'm sure we all remember that. And introduced new fees to increase their profits. That was because there was a low interest rate environment for the banks. Now that net interest margins are high as a result of increased interest rates, there is no reduction in these additional fees. There is none. So while the banks have immediately matched increases on interest rates for their loans, 4.7% US prime increases in the last 15 months, they have been slow to increase the interest rates they pay on their cash deposits. And I got loans. But those that got plenty of money, not receiving much on it. And where they have increased the rates paid, the raise has been marginal, whether in Cayman Islands dollars or US. So it is clear, Madam Speaker, that banks are in a position to reverse some of their recent Cayman Islands interest rate increases and provide a moratorium for a period of time from further increases, as other jurisdictions similar to Cayman have done. And that's what I'm asking. Whether it's 2 years or a year, I say 2 years. Madam Speaker, these economic conditions are hitting our people hardest ever. I've never in my 10 terms in this House and watching from that gallery for 2 terms before that and being involved in the community for more than 50 of my 68 years. I've never seen it this way. Never seen it this way. People are hurting and there is no use. We can't come to this House with such severity existing. We can't come here as lawmakers pushing the ideas about spending $4.5 million on consultants, telling us how and where we can build roads, the lack of which, Madam Speaker, further aggravate and hurt our people. We can't come here and be bereft of ideas and the gumption to utilize our money for our people. And I say our money. And I certainly think, Madam Speaker, that in better economic climate, as I said, we have the lowest loss rates on mortgages. So if we create a situation where we utilize our money, our pension money, and pay a decent interest, and in turn lend our people, that is going to be a better economic climate for our people. Our people. Madam Speaker, Caribbean Development Bank can lend out at 4%. At 4%. But we experience continually these crippling interest rates and throw up our hands in despair saying, oh, they won't do anything, won't meet with us. They're the banks not caring because they have us over a barrel. So that is a good thing. we must throw up our hands in despair? Good leadership? No. 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 I say, Madam Speaker, we must now utilize what we have. We have millions of dollars of pension money going overseas, and sometimes losing millions of our money is being lost overseas. Millions of dollars. We have two entities, our credit union and our development bank. Take our pension money and put it there, and when our people start to pull their mortgage and go to those two entities, then those who say we can't touch the banks will see those same banks becoming more competitive. Take the money, the pension money, and put it in our development bank, and put it in our credit union, and allow our people to borrow. And you have the expertise to do as good banking as anybody from overseas that you bring here, Cayman staff. They will know what to do. They will know who's a risk and who's not. Not these young people that come and tell you nonsense stories about sovereignty and all this stuff. Sovereignty? You better look at sovereignty a different way. We must, honorable members, do something. We, as lawmakers, can't listen to these worn-out cliches. They are old as Methuselah. At least I don't believe we should, because our people are suffering
Honorable Member for
in this
Westby
bad
West.
economic climate.
Just one moment, please. We've passed the hour of 4:30.
Yes, ma'am, I saw that, and I was thinking I should sit down a little bit.
Honorable Premier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to move the suspension of Standing Order 10.2 in order to allow the business of the House to continue beyond the hour of interruption. Thanks.
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, no. This honorable House may now proceed beyond the hour of 4:30.
So, thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank honorable members for going on in a day that is private members' day, but we only got started now. Madam Speaker, I say utilize our development bank. I know they don't like to hear me, and they make their remarks about it, but the fact is that private members' day is private members' day, and I hold that's what we should be doing, private members' business, except for those most challenging things that a government has to deal with. Not taking all this time doing reports and taking up our time. Now we're going to stay here forever. Do that on a regular day when it's government business. That's what our standing order says. That's what the Commons do. So don't make no side remarks at me, because I can't see good sometimes, but I can hear good. I hear good. You just behave yourself, Premier. Just behave. I give you all kind of support. Just give us the right support. Give us, and don't sing them songs about you can't do anything. Don't sing them songs, because I'll tell you that comes out of the sky. And I was listening to one of my favorite Adventist songs, hymns, and he says, he's coming soon, I know. Coming back to this earth again. Get off that cloud, come back down here. Madam Speaker, in our development bank law, Section 9 gives the government a wide span to do something with the development bank, utilize the development bank. And I want to take the time to read Section 9 of that law. And it says, it shall be the function of the bank to mobilize and provide finance for and promote and facilitate the expansion and strengthening of the economic development of the islands. In particular, and without prejudice to the generality of subsection 1, the bank may accept and deposit any funds or any kind of securities from the government, a public or statutory authority, a cooperative or friendly society, or any person or body, whether within or outside the islands. B, make all payments duly authorized by the depositor with the bank. C, make loans or advances or provide any form of credit to the government, a public or statutory authority, a cooperative or friendly society, or any person or body within the islands for the financing of any enterprise or project. D, make loans or advance or provide any form of credit to any enterprise. E, provide any form of assistance to any enterprise, whether in the form of expertise or technical or managerial advice or participation in the share capital or management thereof. F, provide finance in order to promote and facilitate development in the islands and the establishment, management, acquisition, or disposal of any enterprise or business in agriculture, industry, electronic commerce, tourism, housing, and human resource development. G, provide finance to persons for courses of education, including academic, technical, and vocational training at local and overseas institutions, and we are doing that too, which are considered by the bank to be beneficial or needed in the islands. H, promote agricultural, tourism, and industrial development and investment in the islands. I, provide finance for the purpose of building and the acquisition of houses, for the improvement of dwelling, and for the provision of dwellings for letting or for sale by construction, conversion, improvement, or otherwise upon such terms and conditions as the bank may decide. J, undertake in the islands such other projects and programs as the cabinet may approve. K, undertake and formulate any studies which the bank considers necessary for the performance of its functions or conducive to any of its functions. Enter into any contract with or act as agent or trustee for or representative of the government or anybody, agent or body within or outside the islands. And M, give advice, financial counsel, management, consulting, and technical assistance in relation to any functions specified in this subsection. And, Madam Speaker, that's 9. 10 has similar. 12, similar permissions and safeguards. And 13, down to 14. All those sections deal with the finances and what the bank can and the government can and cannot do. So, Madam Speaker, as I said, restructure. I don't know how much there, that's cabinet. I'm not in cabinet, I'm not in caucus. I don't know all these things. All I know that we can do so, and we ought to be doing so. So, Madam Speaker, we must utilize what we have. We must utilize the millions of money that is being sent overseas and are being lost. I don't hear no reports to this House about how much is being lost. But I tell you, you made me a member of the Public Accounts Committee, and I intend to raise it there. So, Mr. Chairman, if you don't want me doing that, you had the way done before. Tell them take me off, because I'm going to raise it. I am going to raise it. We need to know how much we're losing over the years. We're not hearing anything about that. But we are protecting our people. While they don't report to government because they are private sector entities, fact is our people are losing millions of dollars, have lost millions of dollars, and we haven't heard nothing about it. They go on their merry way, set their regulations, and you have to follow. We set a regulation that we have to follow when we pay pension for our employees. Madam Speaker, there are those who might be quick to say and to talk about scaring the banks away. But I can challenge any legislator or anyone else to show more than what I have done to protect, to enhance, and to promote business here in these islands than what I have done. From refusing the onslaught of Chris Bryant for the introduction of income, property, and value-added tax, to my own warning that beneficial ownership wasn't the best thing, and that I had left my pen home so I couldn't sign when they were trying to force me to. And now even Europe, who was promoting it, is saying the same thing. We have lost much business. I hope we are getting it back in other areas, but we lost that business. So let those who would want to put down this effort tell us then what they are really going to do to help our people if we can't take some of these ideas and government pass this motion and then government look at it with their expertise. Excuses about sovereign debt is not helping our people. Excuses about being tied to the US dollar. We are tied, all right. And thank God that we have a good relationship. But it is time that we do something about the situation where we are benefiting, and in turn, when I say we, mean the country is benefiting more, and in turn, take that benefit and help our people. Madam Speaker, there are those banks who have assisted me in the past, still do, and I can commend and recommend. Jane, as they are prepared to listen, to understand your situation, and come to some agreement to work with you to help. Proven is beginning to do so. Cayman National Bank, I have my farm mortgage with them. That's another story. If we do the right thing with the development bank and help, we can borrow at rates for farming that can make something. And instead of bringing in all these modified foods and what we don't know and what we're eating, create our own farm products here. That's what we can do. But if you got to expand and you got to farm properly, you need funding if you can do it right. The way we're doing it now is a hobby, headaches, and some satisfaction in seeing things grow. So, Madam Speaker, I do hope that we will do something, and let's not find excuses not to do something. That's not good. Never was good. I don't believe in that. Let us find ways and means and take the initiatives. As I said, have the gumption to deal with these people that refuse to talk with you or constantly keep telling you the old cliches, I'm going to leave or the banks will leave. If it's not them saying so, and I have never had one tell me that, but they find the excuses saying, why? And you tied to the US dollar. Oh yes, we are. We must get something out of it now though. So, Madam Speaker, as I said, I am not asking government to do more than I believe a government can do. And I've been there, and I've been willing to stand up, and I'm willing to put my foot forward, and I've been willing to stand up to those people. I get licks for it. All kinds of things happen. All kinds. The bottom line is we have to use our experts in SEMA, to analyze the true cost of capital to our banks and assume the role of setting our true prime rate and not just adopt the United States prime rate as the Cayman prime rate. We get nothing out of it. We also need them to analyze the entire credit market and publish what would be indicative mortgage rates. Are analyzing, therefore, the true cost of capital to our banks. We need a change in the paradigm. We need a change. We cannot continue, and if we're going to help our people, if we are honest, and not going to sit back and say, we can't follow McKeewa. He looking credibility, or he looking support. I'm not running again. Get that in your head. What I am doing is because I know something needs to be done and something that can be done, and I know the people that are hurting and they need something done, not excuses and cliches. Madam Speaker, I am longer than my usual openings, and I thank you for your indulgence.
Does any other member wish to speak? Honourable Member for West Bay West, your microphone is still on. Does any other member wish to speak? The Honourable Premier.
Madam Speaker, thank you very much. Madam Speaker, the no, don't worry about that. Where is that bloody one now? The full interest rate one. No, I think I got it. Madam Speaker, I certainly want to thank the mover of the motion for speaking very passionately and eloquently on the issue as to what our people are facing in this country at the moment. Madam Speaker, we have an unenviable situation where we are faced with the increase in costs of everything that we import to this country. And unfortunately, we import a lot. We import probably 95 or more % of what we consume. So we are impacted by the supply chain issues. We are impacted by the geopolitical issues which impact energy costs. We're impacted by the rising cost of goods internationally in the markets that we receive those exports from. And then, Madam Speaker, we have the issue of interest rates increasing that our people have to manage and deal with. Interest rates that are increasing because of the US Federal Reserve's attempt to control inflation in their own country. And we have the mechanism here where the banks rely on the Fed rate, which when increased or when moved, gets reflected in the New York Fed rate, which is the Fed rate plus 3%, and that is the rate that's adopted by the Cayman retail banks as a mechanism through which there are changes to the prime lending rate in the Cayman Islands. Now, Madam Speaker, I want to say that while the banks, all of the retail banks move their rates based on that mechanism, their prime rates based on that mechanism, and they do so seemingly in unison, at least within 1 or 2 or perhaps 3 days of the change being published in the US. They do, Madam Speaker, nevertheless compete to a certain extent in that they themselves, while they have the prime rate established, they may for customers that they think are an increased risk, they may add an increased premium on that. So it may be let's call it what it is now. I think it's 8.25%. They may add on another percent, so it's 9.25%, so it's prime plus 1%. But in many other cases as well, Madam Speaker, they may decide that they will offer a discount to their particular clients that they think are long-term customers that have been really good credit risks. They have a good track record of making payments and not having default scenarios. So the banks do, as amongst themselves, compete for customers in that way, Madam Speaker. We also, Madam Speaker, have the scenario with the credit union who has chosen to fix their lending rate, their prime lending rate, I think at 6.25%. So they offer a separate competitive force as well, Madam Speaker, and it is very effective because the credit union, while it has a restricted range of customers, in theory, there are so many, so it's not open to anybody, just anybody to walk in and sign up and become a customer. Because there are so many public servants and civil servants, and their close families, there's a huge range of potential customers for the credit union, and they are in a position to provide excellent value to many, many thousands of people in this country, Madam Speaker. And I know for a fact that, because I've heard many people tell me, and I know some people personally who have gone to the credit union from other banks. So they're a stabilizing force, and if, Madam Speaker, they have the support, they could actually provide much more in the way of credit facilities to people in this country. Madam Speaker, let me give you one example of what the government has contemplated doing to assist in this respect. Madam Speaker, I think members will know that we have, in connection with the $330 million drawdown on the loan, which was done in 2022, we purchased Treasury bills, US Treasury bills. Those bills will mature at the end of this month. So we will be receiving the proceeds from those bills in cash. Madam Speaker, we have the option, for example, to give the credit union a deposit of, let's say, 30 or 40 million or 50 million, which will then give them sufficient regulatory capital backing to expand the amount of credit facilities that they could make available, Madam Speaker. So that is one particular option that I think offers very significant potential, and given the differential in the rates which credit union offers to customers. And let me just add, Madam Speaker, they do the same thing too, in terms of assessing whether a particular client or customer has a credit history which may make them slightly more risky or less risky. So they may charge more than the 6.25%. They may add 1% onto that, which will still keep them below prime for the retail banks at the moment. Or they may offer even a discount. So, Madam Speaker, that is one significant potential that the government is looking at in terms of being able to respond to this issue when we're in a position to, when we receive the proceeds from the Treasury bills at the end of this month, which will be the value of the Treasury bills plus the interest earned for the previous 6-month period. I think the interest is paid in 6-month cycles. Madam Speaker, the government, and certainly myself, I understand, and the government understands what the challenges are that are being faced by our people. We get the phone calls from everyone talking about the challenges, Madam Speaker. The difficulty, Madam Speaker, is that this is not something that is new. It's coming at a time when we have high inflation, but that is what drives the rates as well. So it's not something that's new for us. Energy costs are probably not at an all-time high level either, Madam Speaker. But doesn't mean we don't try to do something. So, Madam Speaker, a year ago, myself, the then Deputy Premier and Finance Minister, and the Minister for Financial Services, we met with the Bankers Association, which and the entire board, as a matter of fact, and as far as I am aware, all of the 6 retail banks are represented on the board of the Bankers Association. And I spent some time talking to them about the challenges that we saw coming up and the potential impacts on our people in the country. And one of the things we specifically asked them to do was to consider delaying the change in interest rate and effectively giving people notice. And we specifically asked for 3 months' notice, Madam Speaker. So putting aside the argument about the rate change mechanism and whatnot for now, Madam Speaker, if our people, if customers of the banks are able to get notice that in 3 months' time the rate is going to change, at least they have the opportunity then, Madam Speaker, to consider adjusting their priorities in terms of expenditure. They know that the rate is going to go up. They know they're going to be impacted by increased costs on the mortgage. These are all adjustable rate mortgages, except for the ones that have short-term fixed rates, which is, I think the most they do here in Cayman is 5 years. It's usually 2 to 3 years. So for the vast majority of the occasions, we're talking about adjustable rate mortgages that will fluctuate with the prime rate. But if they can give them 3 months' notice, Madam Speaker, customers, our people have the opportunity to say, you know what, I know my rate's going to go up in 3 months' time. I have to start looking at how I can prioritize my spending, and I can change some of it. I can move away from certain things that I'm spending on now, spend less on those, and transition to make sure that I can accommodate a rate change and an increase in the mortgage, Madam Speaker. That is what we asked for at the time, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we were told by the Bankers Association that they did not anticipate a deterioration in the book value of their mortgages, and that they would reconsider the matter at some future point. But they didn't anticipate this issue as being a significant issue because of this perspective on the lack of deterioration, the projected lack of deterioration. And they didn't think that an across-the-board approach, as requested by us at the time, was appropriate. Madam Speaker, some weeks ago, I again wrote to the banks. And I said, well, now you have your evidence. We have had significant rate increases. And in fact, Madam Speaker, the move of the motion referred to several increases. I can tell you, Madam Speaker, that we are talking about 10 rate increases in 14 months. 10. Those are, the rate of change has been significant, and combined with the impacts of inflation, it is presenting a real challenge to our people. An absolute challenge, Madam Speaker. So I don't have a problem with the perspective that we need to discuss this issue with the banks. We need to represent the interests of our people, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, when I wrote the banks again, I gave them 3 days to come back and give me an answer, because this is not something that we hadn't discussed before. 3 days might usually be regarded as a short period of time, and I think they needed any more than that. They did respond within the 3 days, Madam Speaker, and the view was, as articulated by the banks, by the Bankers Association representative at the time, was that they still didn't see any deterioration in their book of mortgages, and that they did not see the need to provide this 3-month notice request. Madam Speaker, I want to say that there is at least one bank, one of the retail banks, that, and I can't tell you exactly when it was, it may have been, I think it was in relation to the request made to the Bankers Association and all of the board last year. One of those banks did start providing 1-month notifications for the rate changes to their customers. But what happened, Madam Speaker, was none of the other banks followed suit. So of course, they are not going to put themselves at a disadvantage when everybody else is, when all the other members, the other 5 retail banks, are going along with the same approach and changing rates immediately and getting the benefit of 30 days improvement in their revenue from their mortgage portfolio. So that bank stopped doing it. They stopped doing it, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I am aware that there are other overseas territories in which some of our banks operate, and they do not have, they're not tracking exactly the same mechanism. I think there's a very limited number of banks operating in one particular one that I have in mind, and they don't track the Fed rate in the same way, but the banks are not mandated by their local laws to do that. They choose to do that. It's a practice, I guess, that has developed for a significant period of time. And as far as I understand it, Madam Speaker, their mortgage documentation, again, not required by law, but by practice that has developed over time, their mortgage documentation includes a 3-month notice provision. So, Madam Speaker, I think that it is entirely reasonable to ask the banks to consider this. I know it's going to represent some degree of cost to them, but it's certainly, if they're all consistently taking that approach, it's not going to create a competitive disadvantage to them. But they already compete in various ways, offering various rates. They don't all lend at prime, so they do compete. So, Madam Speaker, it is entirely possible for the banks to offer this ability to our people, our borrowers in Cayman. And it's an opportunity for them to be able to adjust their expenditure. Madam Speaker, as I said to you earlier, I said to this House earlier, this current rate is 8.25. That's not the highest it's been in any of our lifetimes, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in the 1980s, I'm not going to date myself, and I can't tell you exactly what the date was. I'm not going to ask any other colleagues across to date themselves either, but somebody might want to shout it out. But interest prime rate in this country was 21% back in the 80s, Madam Speaker. 21%. I didn't see the government of the day lining up banks and shooting anybody. That was a challenge for anybody at that time. And Madam Speaker, we don't have to even go that extreme. Prime rate, Madam Speaker, in Cayman has been up and down over the years. And even if we go back to 2001, 2002, 2001 in particular, I think, prime rate was 9.5%. Yeah. And I can assure you, Madam Speaker, the reason it was 9.5% is they were fighting inflation in the US as well. And if they were fighting inflation in the US, we were importing that same inflation here at the time. So we have always been challenged by these situations where inflation in the countries in which we are importing the majority of our supplies, the costs have gone up. It's gone up for them. They have a monetary policy mechanism, and they are trying to control inflation. They're trying to tamp down demand to control inflation. That has an impact on us. It has an impact on what the cost of everything we consume, and it has an impact, and that's directly, even if we buy it from the source in the US, But it has a double impact here because businesses that are importing have to pay the increased cost, and they have the cost of capital and cost of credit that they're operating with, and they have to pay an increased rate from the local banks. So this is an ongoing scenario, Madam Speaker, that we have been challenged with for a very long time. Madam Speaker, it frustrates me when the response from the Bankers Association is just simply, we don't see a deterioration. Madam Speaker, the truth is, while we have had very painful periods of foreclosures here, and if we go back in the last 10 years, subsequent to the global financial crisis, we have had very painful periods there where our foreclosure rate has gone up and our people have lost homes. But Madam Speaker, if we compare it to other countries, in a way, even as painful as we've had it here, many of them have had it a lot worse. Our rate of foreclosures has, though very painful, has not been something that's been overwhelming. Thank God for that. But Madam Speaker, we must continue the pressure on behalf of our people for the banks to recognize that everybody can assist in some little way. The government is challenged to assist, Madam Speaker, and we have been doing that. We are challenged to assist on the increased cost of living. We have had in excess of 25 areas and items in which we have reduced duty, Madam Speaker. They have been articulated in this House over the last 2 years. We have done the electricity support program last year for 6 months, which helped 22,000 households, Madam Speaker. So the government is trying to do as much as we can do. The previous government, Madam Speaker, put in place, because of the COVID-related issues, they put in place the stipends to help support people who had lost opportunity or lost their job completely. We continued that as well, Madam Speaker, until we got to the point where we gave enough notice that it would be reduced or eliminated, and opportunity was there. Madam Speaker, we have one of the highest rates of unemployment in the country, or lowest rates of unemployment in the country, I should say, highest rates of employment, lowest rates of unemployment in the country in decades. So the opportunity is there. Of course, we have situations where there's underemployment as well. But the government has been trying to find ways to respond to the challenges, to help people address the issue of costs, increased costs, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the projection for interest rates over the next year is one in which I understand the projection is that it will likely be declining. Don't know what rate. But as I said, and I'm looking back at the prime rate fluctuations in Cayman, we have had periods where the prime rate has been 9.5%, 10%, and then within 6 or 8 months, it goes down 3 or 4%. Different reasons for that, Madam Speaker. Some of it is driven, I guess, by the Fed's reduction in the rate. Some of it is driven because there is the potential for recession. So the Fed then reverses their focus and starts thinking about, well, how do we make sure that we don't end up with a significant recession? So perhaps they start moderating the rates then. That has the same impact here in Cayman. Madam Speaker, the issues around prime rate is not simple. There are complex factors at work, Madam Speaker. If we had the ability right now to tell the banks, you have to charge 2% less right now, one of the impacts on that, Madam Speaker, would likely be that all the thousands of people that have deposits would have what's being offered to them as a saving rate or a certificate of deposit rate, that would probably reduce. One of the things we have done, Madam Speaker, to try to assess whether the increase in prime rate reflects the banks in Cayman taking advantage of that and widening its spread and making more money on that, is to review the records that are generally available on the spread between the deposit rates and prime rate. And it's been fairly consistent based on information that we have had up until maybe 6 months ago. I don't remember exactly what it is. So what it tells us, Madam Speaker, is that the banks are not widening the spread. They're not trying to make any sort of windfall profits off of the increased prime rate, while not also increasing the amounts that they pay to their depositors. Now, Madam Speaker, the truth is for some banks, they may have loads of cash and they may not be challenged. They may be less interested in offering a very competitive rate. Other banks will offer much more competitive rates, so they compete at that level as well. But in general, the spread hasn't increased. So what it demonstrates is that the banks are not trying to take advantage of the interest rate increases. Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, on the issue of banks not increasing the rates for 24 months, I don't see what incentive they'd have to agree that at this point, Madam Speaker. We do have we are in discussions with, or had indications from one particular bank who might be prepared to freeze the rates for a period of time. But that would be going forward. That wouldn't be a reduction in the current prime rate. And in fact, Madam Speaker, if we only have one more increase, and then in 6 months' time the rate starts coming down, that's not going to help us very much, unless they also agree to build in that reduction. So, Madam Speaker, asking them to set the rate, freeze the rate for 24 months, is not going to achieve any level of compliance at this point. If we were to try to legislate that, Madam Speaker, I don't know what the potential impacts could be, but it is a complex issue, and it will have repercussions on the many thousands of people that have deposits here as well. Madam Speaker, on the question of the rate setting, I heard the mover say, and I appreciate his perspective, that we don't want to get into a consideration of a hugely expensive exercise in order to try to achieve something like this. And that we do have the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority, who the mover feels might be able to engage in this way to become this rate-setting body. Madam Speaker, as a former chairman of the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority, I am quite aware, and particularly I've had these discussions previously with Cayman Islands Monetary Authority. Their view on it, Madam Speaker, is that we will perform these kinds of functions. We will become a central bank for you, a quasi-central bank, but you've got to fund it. You've got to give us tens of millions more in order for us to develop all this policy background and to be able to make these kinds of decisions. We don't have the resources, Madam Speaker, to be adding $20 million to CEMA's budget in order for them to build the significant capacity in order to provide this kind of role. And Madam Speaker, I'm not aware of any other overseas territory that has the same thing. So, Madam Speaker, while I wish it was a simple issue, and we would love to find an easy answer, Madam Speaker, this is a problem. This is an issue that has recurred time and time again, and it is just one of the cycles we are going through. Our people are struggling. We have to find the ways to help as much as possible. But the question is, how could we find a mechanism by which to do this through causing them to reduce rates? Our best chance of helping people right now, Madam Speaker, is, and it would have been immensely more beneficial in the past. I suppose the rate changes have occurred so fast over the last 14 months that it would have been a frequent thing. But, Madam Speaker, we need to take a broad picture perspective as to how to help our people in a multitude of different ways, including some of the smaller ways that add up, including doing things like putting more pressure on the banks to implement an extended notice period. Madam Speaker, we have, as a result of work done by the Law Reform Commission, we have under consideration, and I've spoken about this before, reform in relation to the residential mortgage provisions under the Land Law, the Lands Act, that is under consideration right now, that is being discussed with the banks. Madam Speaker, we have one opportunity with that, in that we could build in a 3-month requirement for notice in terms of a change in the rate. Now, that hasn't been specifically discussed with the banks in terms of mandating it, but we can certainly do that, Madam Speaker. I would like to have this reform in place as soon as possible. You know why, Madam Speaker? Because while the banks are saying that they're not seeing a significant deterioration and we're not reflecting a significant increase in foreclosures. In fact, the foreclosure numbers have actually dipped more recently. Madam Speaker, I'm not convinced that that is going to be the long-term picture. I suspect there's an even chance that if rates don't start coming down over the next 12 months, there may be people who may find it more and more difficult. And the reform of the law that we're proposing in respect to that, Madam Speaker, will provide useful space within which the banks and their borrowers can work together to minimize those impacts, to minimize the risk that in the longer term, that borrower, that customer would lose their house. So, Madam Speaker, that is something that I would like to see us moving towards. I know the Minister is, at the moment, with her colleagues in the ministry, in further discussions, further consultation with the banks. But that is an opportunity for us, Madam Speaker, to not only require notice to be given, but also to provide a mechanism through which, when or if someone finds themselves in the unfortunate position of starting to get behind or missing their mortgage payments, that the banks would be required by law to engage more fully with them, to be proactive with them, to be helpful towards them. That's exactly it, Madam Speaker. There's two protocols that are contemplated, Madam Speaker. So, as you noted, Madam Speaker, that one I'm referring to in terms of being of assistance in that scenario where people are starting to reflect difficulties is a pre-action protocol, or I don't remember the exact name of it as contemplated in the legislation. But there's also a protocol for when people are entering into mortgage, so that they understand exactly what their obligations are, exactly what all the rights are, exactly what may happen in different scenarios, and they have proper and clear advice in respect to that. I know, I have some friends in the banking industry who say, we don't need to do all this tick-the-box stuff and all that. But I think the tick-the-box stuff is important, Madam Speaker, because it's a reflection that someone has spent the time with the customer to say this is, and not made any assumptions. They've spent the time with the customer to explain exactly what their obligations are, what the bank's obligations are, and the time periods around potential issues arising. And then, Madam Speaker, they will be in a better position should they start to have any problem down the road. We would have the pre-action protocol, which would again require the banks to engage proactively. The banks have a code of conduct, Madam Speaker, that back in 2014, I think it was, I engaged with the Bankers Association at that time, and there was a change to one of the elements of the protocol to encourage the banks to be more proactive, to engage quicker when there was a perceived problem. And, Madam Speaker, they say they continue to adhere to those. But that's not the same as having specific provisions in the law, which would require them to engage in a proactive manner. So it doesn't become something that somebody just forgot. Somebody was on vacation, somebody was out sick, and somebody else didn't take it up and engage with the customer. So, Madam Speaker, all of these things this is a reflection of a reality. It's a reflection of what we in the government can can do to help in general this scenario, not just for today, but going forward. And we have the ability, we have demonstrated the changes that we have made, Madam Speaker, in terms of reductions in duty to lower the cost of living. Madam Speaker, what I didn't also remind us about the school lunches, the school breakfast, the snacks, all of those things, Madam Speaker, they add to reducing the cost of families who have kids in the public schools. And that's a significant number of families, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in the public schools, we have 5,500 young people. That's a significant number of families, Madam Speaker, that benefit from what we have done in the past to address this issue of this high cost environment that we're in at the moment. Madam Speaker, I just want to say in relation to the proposal around the Cayman Islands Development Bank. Madam Speaker, I have had a meeting with representatives of the CIDB on this question about changing the law for them to be able to accept deposits. Madam Speaker, I asked when they came if they could provide me with the work they had done, a business case, a justification to reflect the proposal. I don't think that has been done, Madam Speaker. But I think that I have been promised that I will be provided with it. But Madam Speaker, I think in principle, we have to reflect some realities that the CIDB has been able to assist some people with reduced fixed-term mortgages. Reduced term fixed rate mortgages. But Madam Speaker, unless the government has a lot of money to capitalize the bank with, which has been the challenge one of the challenges for CIDB, we're not going to be able to continue to broaden that benefit, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, there's one reality that we should face as well, which is that the change to CIDB to allow them to take deposits is a fundamental change in relation to CIDB. It's a fundamental change, Madam Speaker. It's a fundamental change in the way they are looked at from a regulatory perspective. And that is one of the reasons why I was asking for this justification in the business case to reflect all of those factors. I don't know what it means in terms of whether the regulator, which is Cayman Islands Monetary Authority, whether they would charge increased fees. I imagine they're not going to take on significantly increased responsibilities to regulate CIDB as a deposit-taking institution without reflecting fees that cover their cost in that respect, which will be significantly, their obligations and their costs in doing that would be significantly increased. So that would have to be reflected against any potential benefits of doing that, Madam Speaker. There's another aspect, Madam Speaker, that is a reality that every member in this House knows. and we're not going to run away from it. We have to face it. Unless we have cash to be able to put it with CIDB that we can afford to have impaired, the unfortunate reality is that many people just look at CIDB as a government bank, a government institution, and they may not. They may have a different view in terms of whether they feel that they have the same obligations as if it was the credit union or one of the commercial banks. So, Madam Speaker, there are concerns there as well. I know the position that CIDB has been in the past. They currently still have an impaired balance sheet. They have somewhere in the region of 25 or 26% of their mortgage portfolio, which is non-performing. So it is problematic to take an institution that we're trying to revive, they're trying to stabilize, and put new money in to bolster what's available to potential borrowers in those kinds of circumstances where there have been historical problems. It would probably be even worse, Madam Speaker, if we were talking about third-party customers of the bank putting money in as depositors. Ultimately, government would end up being responsible for that as well, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, if the government was to place a deposit with CIDB, as long as that was perfectly protected and there was no risk, I suppose that would work. But there is a risk, Madam Speaker, that a deposit placed with CIDB by the government might not end up being available to the government as cash reserves when it's needed. So, Madam Speaker, there are a lot of potential opportunities, but there are a lot of challenges and there are a lot of complexities around this issue. And Madam Speaker, I think that we are best placed to work with the banks, continue to engage, continue to put the pressure on them, but also to bring on this residential mortgage reform that comes through the Law Reform Commission, through which we could require 3 months' notice, Madam Speaker, so that our people would be in a better position to adjust. It's easy, Madam Speaker, to get up and talk and say, and it's not the first time, I suppose, this challenge has presented itself. Perhaps it's not the first time that people have said, yes, we got to do something about it, we must do it now. But I challenge anybody to show me in history when the rates were 21%, what did the government do? Did the government step in and stop something and put their foot down and turn something around? When it was 9.5% in 2001, what did the government do at that time, Madam Speaker? It is understandable that we want to do something. It is understandable that there are people in our communities and some of our constituents who want us to do something, Madam Speaker. The question is, what can we demonstrate to them? What have we demonstrated to them over the years when the rates were much higher? Madam Speaker, the rates may be trending down. I think the indication is there may be another quarter point rise anticipated, but it is trending down. I think there's also concern around the potential for a recession in the US. That's putting added pressure on the consideration around how much do you focus on trying to get inflation down to this 2% target that they typically aim for. So, Madam Speaker, I believe that it is likely that the rates will be coming down, but I also believe that we have some opportunities to help people in a variety of ways, in a whole broad cross-section of ways that does not represent any acceptance that we can't do something in this type of scenario. We have an obligation to be honest with people. We have an obligation to do what we can, Madam Speaker. And there are things that I've outlined that we can do that provides real, tangible benefits to our people. Madam Speaker, I think that Madam Speaker, I have had to do plenty of hard things. I've had to make plenty of hard decisions in this job. I've had to make plenty of hard decisions in my life. I'm not afraid of making hard decisions. I'm not afraid of taking on challenges. So I have nothing, I carry no torch, I carry no water for anybody, either in the financial services industry or certainly any of the banks. But Madam Speaker, let us be honest about how we can help our people. And if somebody can find a way to take a different approach and have a different effect that we have not in this country been able to demonstrate in all the years, in all the periods where we've had interest rates way higher than what it is now, I'll be the first one to be along with them. I think what I've outlined are things that we can achieve, Madam Speaker, that will benefit people. I think those represent tangible possibilities for our people, Madam Speaker, in addition to all of the other things that we have been delivering for people in this country. Madam Speaker, I thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Premier. Members, we will pause for a 30-minute suspension to have our evening meal snack. Before we do, I'm the Speaker of Parliament and I should remain in a neutral position. However, I will say that I'm pleased to hear that the government is looking into the mortgage reform legislation. As members on the government side knows, that's something that I was adamant about before I became Speaker, so I'm pleased to hear that. We'll take our suspension now.